Nick Marchmont. Thank you very much.
There we go, you should be able to hear me now. Well, thank you very much all for coming out on such a cold and chilly night. As James said, some of you will have seen the basis of this talk before, and normally, even when people came to see it before it was enhanced, it was good for them to have a bit of revision, because you tend to understand it all as it's going on, and then forget it all by the time you get home. Tonight, I bought, there's already a lot of extra stuff being added to the talk, a lot of extra details in there, but also this evening for the second half, I bought some really giant pieces of geometry that take it a lot further than the last talk went. These are genuine pieces that you won't really see anywhere else. So hopefully that'll make it even more exciting for those of you who have seen the original version of the talk. It is a pretty dense talk, this one. You're basically going to be doing the best part of a year's work in about an hour and a half, roughly 2 3/4 hour sessions. Nonetheless, all of the shapes we're going to be talking about are already embedded in your biological systems. So your inner you is going to understand what's going on and respond to the pieces as you see them. Some of them you'll respond to more strongly than others. It means that really, strictly speaking, I'm just standing here spoiling the silence. I could just stand them all up there and spin them, and you get a fair amount of information straight into your inner you. The reason why this is the case is because we're all made up of billions of centres of vibrating energy, and it's functioning in a field made up of other lines and centres of force. It's all energy, all electromagnetism. And the distribution of this energy is governed by the same geometries that define the cosmos. So from the tiniest quantum event through all of biology to galaxies and the hearts of stars, the principles and forms examined in this presentation underlie absolutely everything that we see in the everyday world. There's going to be no sums, well, not many numbers. It's nearly all just shapes and images. A lot of us were scared off geometry when we were at school because of the way it was approached. Really, geometry, all of these forms represent music. Basically, music is geometry for the ears. So, what is sacred geometry? Geometry is the way number unfolds into space, and that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. It's the word sacred that causes people most difficulty, I think. The information that we're going to look at tonight is older than the oldest texts. It's basically unchanged since 350 BC, when a character called Euclid first wrote it down. Euclid was really, in ancient Greece I think it was, but he was inheriting it from unknown times before. What's happened to all of these texts is that they've been brought up in societies that have then died. As we know, people frequently burn and smash up libraries, and quite often there's been just a single person who's been responsible, quite often monks, for pulling this dying information out, transcribing it, making sure it's safe for the next generation. So although it's put down to Euclid, it's actually much, much older than 350 BC. Some of you might know that the Bible was first pulled together around the same time. Now, one of the things that I think make this particular information sacred is the fact that it hasn't changed. Nearly everything else we look at does. Science tells you that something's true one minute, and the next day it will tell you something else. One example that springs to mind is that the world was for a long time thought to be 6,000 years old. Rosalind, in Shakespeare's As You Like It, says this world is but 6,000 years old. Well, scientists are now telling you it's 4,500 million years old. So that shows you just how long they can be. So science changes over time. The Bible is constantly rewritten, a subject which, again, I could probably go on about on itself for about 45 minutes. How as each generation comes along, every 300 years or so, somebody comes along and adds new stuff to it, and they also change all the stuff that went before. The information we're looking at tonight has not changed at all since it was written. We've learned a lot more about it, we've learned a lot more about how applicable it is, but the basic stuff on which we're building remains absolutely unchanged, at the heart of things, sacred. It's in the foundations of all natural design, so the reason why your immune system, if it's not being interfered with, can protect you and defend you from diseases that have never before been seen on the planet is because it's all based on this. Whatever it is that's coming in will be geometric in nature, so are your biological systems. So they can recognise the shape of it, and they can make antibodies that then set out about dealing with whatever it is that's come into your system. Another thing that makes it sacred is the fact that you don't actually have to know any maths. Nearly all of this stuff can be done simply with a straight edge, i.e. a ruler with no measurements on it at all, and a pair of compasses. That's all you need. And all of these shapes that I'm going to show you today can be drawn on pieces of paper only using a straight edge and a pair of compasses. Speaking as a landscaper, I can also say that that sort of principle is extremely useful once you start trying to get things onto the ground, because it means with a peg in the ground and a rope and a can of spray paint, and again a straight edge, you can replicate all of these things on the ground. So for example, now it's very easy for me to do square shed bases. It's very easy for me to do octagons and hexagons and all manner of shapes, just using the principles that I learned when I was preparing this talk. And of course the principles that we're going to talk about here have been used in all of our sacred spaces, be it a church, barrows, stone circles, all of them, even Washington DC, especially Washington DC. Why, we wonder, have they used some of the principles we're talking today very, very carefully to set out that city? That's an answer that I think we're still looking for, but by and large it's because the powers that were, as I like to call them, are using magic to keep control over what's going on. And at the base of magic, just like at the base of everything else, is geometry. So, before we actually get into the three-dimensional world and into the geometry talk as it is, because we're going to work our way all the way from the dot to hyperspace and then back down to the first dimension. And before we get into that, it's helpful if you understand one or two principles. Here's one of the first things we can talk about. The picture that's up on the screen at the moment is done by a friend of mine. He runs my website for me, and he also makes those beautiful moon calendars. If anybody of you seen the long dark blue moon calendars with the silver moons on them, that's Mick the Moon's work. He's also responsible for whenever I get something slightly wrong, he's the one who comes along and tells me. He's absolutely merciless, he won't let me get away with anything. This is an artistic rendition of a thing called a Penrose pattern. It's one example of a sort of fractal design. It's been warped slightly, and we'll see a flat version of it in a minute, but it's made up of only basically 3 diamond shapes. Now as your eyes look at it, they're going to find it very, very hard to see a flat thing. You're going to be seeing cubes coming out of it, you're going to be seeing spheres made out of cubes. Can everybody see that? And your eyes are constantly moving around it, trying to find the flat thing. They're looking for the symmetry in it, and it's got a 3-dimensional symmetry. Of course, it's merely photons, it's merely light on a flat screen. So that's starting to show you some way in which your consciousness interacts with geometry and realises it to be something much bigger than it is. When we look at the roots of that particular thing, this is an actual Penrose pattern. If you look in the very centre of it, you'll see there's a star, a 7-pointed star made out of a given size of diamond. Surrounding that are some things that look roughly like squares, and again there's 7 of them, but they're actually diamond shaped as well. And then round those squares there's another 7 diamonds that are kind of quite long and flat. Everybody see those 3 different sorts of diamonds? They're in sacred proportion to each other, which is something that we'll get to a little bit later in the talk. That's one of the new parts of the talk, when I talk about sacred proportion and the Fibonacci sequence. All of the other shapes that you see around there are made up of those 3 original forms. Now once again, that one's even more chaotic to your consciousness. Your eyes just will not be able to stand still on it. If they do, you'll be able to make little bits of it go flat in your consciousness, but they won't stay flat for long. And once again, you'll be able to see ellipses that are 3-dimensional, cubes that are 3-dimensional, circles that are 3-dimensional. The very centre bit, the bit that I described at the very beginning, I use as my coloured ID when I'm on the internet. So anywhere where you see a coloured one of those, it means that I'm the person behind it, no matter which of my various names I'm using at the time. I'm actually known as Nick M most of the time now, having dropped my surname. The image, of course, is a plane. It's 2-dimensional. It's actually flat, as I said, but it's very difficult for your mind to see it as a flat thing. And one of the things we're going to be looking at in this original first part of the talk is exactly how weird our understanding and our grasp of the 3rd dimension actually is. It's only when it's interacting with your cognition that it becomes really a masterpiece of complexity. So that's one example of a fractal design, which is basically a complex design that's based on very, very simple principles. And that's what we're going to be coming to again and again this evening, is the fact that the beautiful shapes that we're going to be looking at, all the ones that are on my table here, the ones we're going to be talking at in the second half, and the ones I've still got hidden in boxes underneath the table, so that they don't distract you from the simple ones. So we're going to build this image slowly but surely. We're going to see how planes are constructed, how simple three-dimensional shapes are constructed, and by the end you'll actually be seeing renditions of hypergeometry hanging and spinning in front of you. That's another thing I should mention, is that although all of them are kind of captured in space and frozen as these three beautiful three-dimensional designs, made in Bali these are, it's actually as a spinning thing that they work really well. Some of you will be able to see that if you look at these spinning things, look away and look back, suddenly it'll be spinning in the other direction. Some people can do this immediately, some people it takes a little bit of time. But it really is quite extraordinary. You can go, yeah, that's going anti-clockwise, 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 look away, look back, and it'll be spinning clockwise. Look away, and it'll be spinning anti-clockwise again. When you get really good at it, or when it's actually against an uncomplicated surface, all of this is a bit complex. If you've got it hanging in front of a stone wall, and you get really good at the switching it backwards and forwards, you can actually see it spinning in both directions at once, and then, like the design on the screen there, it becomes a two-dimensional form, a waveform, and what you see is the waves moving in both directions at once. That is actually the true nature of the things that we're looking at. Another version of a fractal is this one. This is one that I made myself, and I started off with a big fluorescent pink triangle in the middle. And then I've simply carried on making more triangles. Each triangle is made up of sides that are half the length of the triangle that it's attached to. So those green triangles have got sides that are half the length of the pink triangle, the orange triangle half the length of the green, the yellow half the length of the orange, and the small pink ones are half the length of the yellow ones. And what that means is that you can actually fit 4 of the green triangles into the pink ones. You can see that there's a pink shadow triangle in the middle. So one green triangle fits into the pink here, another one fits into the second pink, a third one fits into the third pink, leaving you with another one in the middle. The same is true of the orange ones into the green, the yellow ones into the orange, and the little pink ones into the yellow. Now, one of the interesting things about this particular design is that if you look at the orange and the pink, the big pink, the orange and the little pink, you'll see that you can draw a straight line all the way down them, so that the little pink ones aren't going out any further than the big pink one in the middle. So if I had an infinitely sharp pair of scissors and an infinite amount of card, I could just keep making smaller and smaller triangles, and they'd never go outside the border of the original design. Now, here, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later in the talk, we believe in the third dimension that you can't grow without taking up space that could be occupied by other people. That is not fundamentally the nature of the universe. Fundamentally, the nature of the universe is that we can all grow infinitely without actually infringing at all on the consciousness or the space that's occupied by anybody else. So when we have babies, when we give birth to children, we're not taking up space, we're making more space. There's an infinity of connections, an infinity of brilliance inside each human being. And we actually grow like this. There are reasons why things are that restricted, which we won't have time to go into. But one of the things that geometry does is it enables you to demonstrate complicated ideas like that and explain them. And by looking at the image, your body can understand and your consciousness can understand what's going on, even though it's impossible for us actually to grasp it, if you like, with our kind of conscious brain, with the brain that's used to dealing with the real world. Now, another factor in this thing is I can also do the same thing in the middle. So what we've got there is we've got one of the green triangles upside down in the pink triangle, and then upside down in the green triangle is an orange one, then a yellow one, then a pink one. Those are all exactly the same size and shape as the triangles that are around the outside. So technically speaking, you could go again. You could, if you had an infinitely sharp pair of scissors, you could keep making more triangles in the centre of that design, and it could grow inwards and outwards forever. just like we do. Fountains of energy, fountains of light. We actually give off photons. Every time our cells split, we give off light energy, which can actually be seen with some modern measurements. One of the other things that's important about that is it turns out that the triangle is fundamentally at the basis of everything. Although we're going to talk about, first of all, three basic shapes: the triangle, the square, which has got 4 sides, and the pentagon, which has got 5 sides. And then a little bit later on, as we reach more complexity, we double that and we talk about shapes that have got 6 sides, 8 sides, and 10 sides. That's what everything is made up of, the entire cosmos. We're going to look at all the basic shapes all the foundation shapes of the cosmos in one evening. And the upside down triangle inside a triangle that is got the side lengths that are double the middle one, and areas that are actually 4 times. It turns out to be fundamental to everything. The square can be divided into triangles, the pentagon can be divided into triangles. So, whilst we make it more complicated, triangles are absolutely at the root of everything. Fractal, another more complicated fractal design, it's a simple arithmetic phrase that gives birth to very complicated shapes. The chances are that the equation that makes this really complicated and beautiful design is only made up of 2 or 3 expressions. So there'll be 1 letter on one side of the equal sign and 2 letters on the other side. But the trick is that whatever the answer is, the one that's on the right-hand side of the equal sign feeds back into the value on the left-hand side, which changes the value on the right-hand side, which changes the value on the left-hand side. This is mathematics that was invented by a character called Leibniz some several hundred years ago. And he just knew it was true. He didn't have computers, so he couldn't see it. In order to come up with this sort of image, you need to have machines that are capable of performing millions and millions of calculations every second. Now, you can all see, I hope, that hanging around in that shape are loads and loads of different sized tridents, three-pronged kind of forks. They're all at different scales, and if you were to zoom into them, all of them would have around them these bigger shapes. So that basically you can actually get computer programs now where you can press the go button, and what happens is these things just generate and you can zoom into them. Wherever there's a shape, the little simple equation that I was telling you about is still running. Wherever there's just colour like white or blue or the brownie or the greeny colours, the expression is no longer operating and they're dealing with values that are running somehow outside the expression. That's called a Juliet set. It's one of many sorts of different fractal you can get. But the important thing about it is that the entire beauty and complexity of that is based on the simple thing. It's a prime example of how the essence of the impossibly large is made up entirely of repetitions and building on the essence of the incredibly small. It's a growth pattern, basically. Now, Leibniz couldn't see it because he didn't have computers to calculate it, and we now can see it. We've now gone even a little bit further than that because we can now grow vegetables that have exactly the same habit. This one's a Romanesco cauliflower, and it's actually based on something very similar to a Juliet set. It's called a Mandelbrot set, but it works on exactly the same principle. And hopefully you can all see that the cauliflower itself has got ever smaller repetitions of the same shape. So the kind of pyramids that you see growing out of it are all made up of smaller pyramids, smaller versions of itself. So the essence of the whole cauliflower is held within the small essence of the tiny little bits of it that go to make the cauliflower up. Quite an incredible thing. They also taste slightly different from other cauliflowers, and now you can get purple ones as well, which are even more attractive. They're really fun to grow, and you take them inside and it's actually hard to cook them because you don't find the time, you're so busy looking at the damn thing.